All right, so let's start with today's stuff. Now, last semester we did all those. At the end of the last semester, we did all the sine graph and cosine graph, and now we can say a temporary goodbye to all the secant graph, cosecant graph, tangent, and cotangent. We are going to focus on those sine graph and cosine graph, and in particular, cosine graph. Now, you may find the name of the topic at the top of the page a little bit ironic because it says sinusoidal, so you may think about sine function because of the name. But what you will see is that we are going to do a lot of cosine function because the cosine function, it's a lot easier to graph compared to sine function. Like sine function, it starts in the middle of the graph, right? It starts from the midline. But midline, it's kind of hard to observe. But if you look at a cosine function, it starts at the highest point, which is a lot easier to spot out when you take a quick glance on the graph. So that's why you're about to see a lot of cosine function. If you did not take a calculator, make sure you have a calculator. Okay, now, so let's look at this little equation right here. Now, what I hope is that you have this genuine curiosity. I hope that you look at this equation and you will wonder a few things, such as, hey, what's the amplitude? What's the amplitude? 3. What's the period? What's the period? What's the period in this case? 18. Because it's 2 pi over b, it's pi over 9, so you have 18 for the period. And you would think about, hey, what are the shifts right here? It is shifting up 2 units and then right 6 units. So I hope that you have this natural curiosity to ask these questions, even though you're not being asked. You'll be like, oh, I think I can ask a few questions. And then we say, oh, let's go ahead and draw a graph. Now, we didn't give you the squared ones or the gridded ones because, hey, it's just a graph. As long as it makes some kind of relative sense, it's good. So we say, all right, where's the midline in this case? The midline is y equals to 2. So we can sort of draw a line at y equals to 2. Okay. And the first point that you're going to plot, well, it's a cosine graph. It's the highest point. So you would go to the right for 6 units. And then what is the y value of the highest point? What is the y value of the highest point? How do you know it's 5? Uh-huh. Yep. Uh-huh. Yep. So you know the amplitude is 3, you know the midline, so it should be 3 units away from the midline, which is 5. And we know the period, and this is also the reason why I taught you my method of drawing graphs, because it works very well with this topic. We say, oh yeah, after 1 period, it's going to come back to the same point. What's the x value for this point? 24. Because the period's 18, so it must be 18 units away from x equals to 6. And then, as we draw our third point, it should be the lowest point right here. What is the y value for this point? -1. What's the X value for this point? 15, because it is, well, half of the period, right? So so 9 units away from 6, so that makes it 15. So what you can see here is you are just basically solving a puzzle. If I want to make this graph even more decent, I will put a point right here. What's the X value for this point in between 6 and 15? 10.5. Now, I hope you're not just writing down these numbers. I hope you do know how these numbers are being written. Now, there are a couple of ways you can think of the way to come up with, let's say, 10.5. Well, one thing we do know is that 10.5 right here, it's exactly in the middle between 6 and 15. Do you know how to find midpoint between two numbers? How do you find them? You average it, right? Just like how you average your test scores, your quiz grades, you average, you add them up and divide by 2. So if you add 6 and 15 together, you get 21, then you divide by 2, 10.5. Or with a very simple logic, you're like, wait, hold on. So from 6 to 15 is a distance of 9. So if you have a midpoint, then the midpoint should be 4.5 units away. So that means you just tag on 4.5 on 6, you get 10.5. I think it's not something very difficult. And we apply the same logic to find out the X value between 15 and 24. That will be 19.5 because it's 4.5 units away. And now you can draw a graph. Okay. You can now draw a graph. And that's what. So that's the first thing we are looking for here. Now, at this point, I also want you to use your calculator. Okay, if you get a calculator right here, then use it. So what you would do is to go ahead and plot, well, enter this equation first. Enter this equation to the graph and take a look at it. And then we're going to do part B and part C together. So what's the equation? So the equation is 2 plus 3 times cosine of pi over 9, close parentheses, x minus 6, close parentheses, enter. Yes. Oh, it does matter. If it's not in radian mode, if it's in degree mode, then you don't see this kind of wave because it's being stretched out. Okay, so it must always be in radian mode. Okay, if you have a question on the graph, wave me over. Yes. Then let's go ahead and answer the questions in part B. It says, what's f of 8? What is f of 8? So on your calculator, I think there's a way to do trace. So just do a graph trace, and I think you can input number 8 right there. Either this. Yeah, I don't know how I would put it over here. For me, the other way I can do analyze graph. No, that's not 0. Can you find out what f of 8 is? In a TI-84, you can analyze the graph a lot easier. You go to table? Go to table. Yeah, so let's see. All right, so if x is 8, then you get this 4.298. So if it's a nice number, then this works pretty well, table 1. Okay, so okay, if it's not, trace, graph trace. Oh, I think you double, oh, well, okay, I don't know how you would do it, but I double tap it and somehow I get this. Now, then there's a problem right here. I tap in 8, and then the answer is only 4.3. Now, if you look at the top of the page, it says you will round the number correct to 3 decimal places. So what you would do is this. You go to menu again. You go to menu, and then you should see option 8 is setting. Okay, option 8 it's setting for menu. So on the menu, option 8 it's setting, and then for setting, you can choose display digits, and you would choose float 3 or float 4. That would give you that would tell the calculator how many digits, how many decimal places you want. Okay, so 2. Now the other way to get around this is to type this into your calculator and just have the calculator compute it for you if you're desperate and not knowing how to find out the y value. So so f of h is 4.298. 4.298. Okay, that's part B. Now I want to put more attention to part C. So it's asking you that, hey, we have a y value of 1.3. We have a y value of 1.3. Can you write down the x values for those first 3 intersections on the positive x side? So on the graph, so what you do is that you would type the button tap. And once you press tab, then it should prompt you to enter a second equation. Okay, if you press tab, it tells you f2 of x like this. And then, well, your second y value, it's 1.3. So you type in 1.3 and then enter. So I hope you can see a couple intersections already. And for this one, you probably would need to adjust your window a little bit. So you have to do your window setting and then just say, all right, I'm gonna change my X max to 20 so that I can see my 3 intersections with positive X values. It's a guess and check process, okay? Earlier, last period, I used 50 and then I ended up seeing a lot of intersections. So this time I'm like, oh, let me go ahead and try 30 and see, or 20 to see how many intersections there are. And then once you have the windows all set up, you can see the 3 intersections. Then you go to menu again, you go to analyze graph, and you would choose intersection. And with Nspire calculator, life is pretty straightforward. You just highlight the region where you see the intersection, and you can tell the intersections right there. So I changed the setting. So I've changed to float 5, or you can go to float 4. So that means my x value should have 4 decimal places. So the first intersection I've got, it's x equals to 0.825. X, it's equal to 0.825. So go ahead, find out the remaining 2. If you need help, I'll come over. The next 2 intersections would be let me again do float 5. 11.175. And then the other one, whoops. The other one would be analyze graph, intersection. Let me change to float 5. You see 3 decimal places, 18.825. Okay. So we expect that you know how to utilize your graphing calculator to find out all these point of intersections. Yeah. Okay. So that's one challenge, okay, that you will see today, tomorrow, and on Thursday. All right. So this is the first type of situation you will see. And that is you're given the equation and then you have to find the intersections. Now, the second kind of situation, which is something that you will see a lot more in a more real life context in the next couple of days, is this. It says the first high point on a sinusoidal graph, it's 1, 10. So 1, 10. That's a high point. And the next low point, it's 7, -4. Okay. 7, -4. So it's a sinusoidal function. So you can visualize this. So I'm gonna again I would like to ask a few questions that we asked earlier. The questions will be: A, what's the amplitude for this graph? A, what's the period for this graph? A, what's the midline for this graph? All right, so take a moment. See if you can solve this puzzle. All right, let's go ahead and look at this puzzle. What's the amplitude? 7, good. How do you know it's 7? Yeah, so it's the highest point is 10, the lowest point is -4. So I think you can tell what the midline is as well. Where's the midline? 3, all right. So it's right in between 10 and -4. So y equals to 3 is the midline. And if you know the midline, it's at 3, then you can tell definitely that the amplitude is 10 minus 3, which is 7. Okay, 7 units away from the midline. And what is the period? It is going to be 12 because it's only half of the graph. So with these information and the graph that we have drawn so far, can you write the function? Well, if you need to write the function, then we need to know the A, B, C, D values. Well, you know the amplitude, so the A is 7. You know the period, so that means the B value is pi/6. You know the midline, it's equal to 3. That means D is 3. What is C then? Well, C is 1, or x minus 1 would be what you write. Okay, C is 1. Okay, so the function, it's going to be y equals to 7 cosine of pi/6 x minus 1 and then plus 3. Okay, so hey, we're just doing this. We have been doing this for a long time, right? Since last month. So now you may use your calculator to answer part B, part 1 and part 2. Okay, what is f of 3.1? And what are the x values? What are the positive x values where the y value is 1.5? Okay, so go ahead, take a moment, find them out. Okay, so after I type in the function, I trace and I type in 3.1. If you look at the right bottom corner, I don't know why it's sneaking in the right bottom corner. It's 6.178. 6.178. Do you all get the same number? Did you type in 3.1?
Yeah.
Do you use the arrow or do you type in 3.1? You have to type 3.1.
I did. I typed in 3.1 and I used the
Okay, so again, make sure that it's the x value being 3.1. All right, then y is being 1.5. So I'm going to type in the other graph, 1.5, for the y value and find out the first three x values for the three intersections. So I'll go to analyze graph intersection. So I got 4.413. 4.413. That's my first one. And then my second intersection would be 9 point, whoops. What did I get? 9.588. 9.588. And then my third one is it's kind of hard to see. $16.412. 16.412. Okay. 16.412. You all get the same three numbers? Yeah. Okay. So yeah. So the stuff right here, pretty straightforward. If you know how to do all these graphing stuff from last semester, if you know how to do the sine graph, cosine graph, which you should because you did the secant graph, cosecant graph. So the only thing about the calculator stuff, it's you have to use the calculator to find out all these things. And if you don't have a graphing calculator at home, you can always, now, for the sake of answering these questions, you can always use Desmos to find out the intersections. It will be so much easier if you use Desmos because if you type it, you're like y equals to 7 and then cosine of pi over 6 and then x minus 1. Oh, sorry. Gotta keep an eye on the equation. Parentheses x minus 1, close parentheses plus 3. And then the second equation, it's 1.5. Y goes to 1.5. Is it 1.5? Yeah, 1.5. So you can just tap on these points and you can tell the intersections straight away. So if you don't have graphing calculator at home, you can use Desmos to get the job done. Okay.